She just wanted to get to the meeting that could change her life, until she was nearly run over by an arrogant biker who turned her world upside down. Little did she know the worst was yet to come. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post daily, continuing. The fine drizzle that always blanketed Portland seemed more intense that Monday morning, as Letitia Oliver stepped off the bus on Maple Street and hurried towards the Civic Center. The cheap umbrella she carried barely protected her brown hair from the persistent mist. That was the city's trademark, but she had grown accustomed to that routine, waking at 5 in the morning in her simple house in Willow Creek, taking the first crowded bus, arriving promptly at 8 for another day as a receptionist at the Miller & Associates law firm. Letitia had grown up amidst the hum of her mother, Mrs. Connie's, sewing machines and the stories her father told about the streets of Portland when he returned from long shifts as a bus driver. His early death, when she was only 15, had left a silent void in the house filled only by the incessant sound of the old Singer machine and the discreet tears her mother shed when she thought no one was watching. Graduating with an education degree from the State University had been the entire family's dream, built penny by penny, with Mrs. Connie sewing through the night to pay for her daughter's transport and study materials. Letitia had graduated with distinction, full of hopes of transforming the city's public education, but reality knocked on the door like an overdue bill. There were no openings in public schools, the state exam was suspended, and private schools paid less than minimum wage. That's how she ended up in the corporate world, using her soft voice and meticulous organization to manage the schedules of lawyers who earned in a month what her family saved in years. The firm was in one of the most elegant buildings downtown, overlooking City Hall, and with mahogany-paneled offices that exuded success and tradition. In that office, Letitia encountered a world completely different from her own. Wealthy clients discussed million-dollar inheritances as if they were restaurant menus. Young lawyers flaunted watches that cost more than her annual salary, and conversations in the hallways revolved around international travel and real estate investments. And it was in this environment that she met Raphael Miller Stone. At 28, Raphael was the most promising criminal lawyer of Portland's new generation. The only son of Stella Miller Stone, widow of one of Oregon's most respected judges, he had grown up in the refined atmosphere of Westlake, attending the city's best private schools, vacationing at resorts on the Oregon coast, and cultivating contacts that would ensure his entry into the most exclusive legal circles. Tall, elegantly built, with dark hair always impeccably styled, and a smile that managed to be both confident and gentle, Raphael drew attention wherever he appeared. He wore tailored suits, drove a BMW that gleamed even in the Portland rain, and had that natural ease of someone who had never worried about money lasting until the end of the month. But behind the perfect facade, Raphael carried the silent weight of never having been allowed to be truly himself. Stella Miller Stone was an overwhelming personality who had dedicated her entire life to building and maintaining the family's social standing. For her, every aspect of her son's life had to reflect the Miller Stone status, where he studied, who he associated with, what cases he accepted, even how he dressed. For years, Raphael had accepted this dynamic without question. He dated daughters of traditional families chosen by his mother, attended social events where he felt like an actor playing a role, and built his career following the steps Stella had carefully planned for him. Until the day Letitia entered his office to deliver a brief, and he looked up from his computer to find a pair of green eyes looking at him with a sincerity he hadn't seen in years. "Excuse the interruption, Dr. Stone," she said, with that soft voice that carried a slight rural accent, inherited from her grandparents who had migrated from the Willamette Valley. "This urgent brief from the court just arrived." Raphael spent a few seconds just observing her, noticing how she moved with a natural grace that had nothing to do with etiquette lessons or rehearsed poses. There was something genuine in her presence, a tranquility that contrasted with the constant bustle of the office. "Thank you, Letitia," he said, realizing it was the first time he had truly paid attention to the receptionist's name. "How's the front desk?" The question was simple, routine, but the way Raphael asked it, with genuine interest looking directly into her eyes, made Letitia feel a warmth in her chest that she tried to ignore. "Quiet for now," she replied. "Dr. Amanda is in a hearing, and Dr. Henry won't be in until after lunch." "Where do you usually eat lunch?" Raphael asked, surprising himself with the spontaneity of the question. Letitia blushed slightly. "I usually bring a packed lunch from home and eat it in the staff break room. How about having lunch with me today? I know a place nearby that serves really good home-style food." The proposal caught Letitia completely by surprise. In 2 years working at the firm, none of the lawyers had ever shown interest in talking to her beyond what was strictly professional. And Raphael, specifically, had always seemed unattainable, like someone living in a parallel dimension of sophistication. I don't know if that would be appropriate," she hesitated. "Why wouldn't it be? We're colleagues. It's just lunch." But both knew it wasn't just lunch. There was something in the air between them, a chemistry that transcended social and professional differences. The restaurant Raphael chose was on a quiet downtown street, far from the sophisticated places he frequented with clients. It was a simple place with wooden tables and dishes that reminded them of home cooking. Letitia felt more at ease there than she had imagined possible. During their conversation, they discovered unexpected affinities. Raphael, despite all his formal education, had a genuine curiosity about literature and education, areas Letitia excelled in. She, in turn, was surprised to discover that he knew Portland's peripheral neighborhoods better than she imagined, because he had done volunteer work in college. "I always wanted to better understand the real city," Raphael confessed, idly stirring his coffee. "Not just the closed circles where I grew up." "And why don't you understand?" Letitia asked, with that frankness that had always characterized her. Raphael remained silent for a few seconds, processing a question no one had ever asked him so directly. "Because I was never allowed to," he admitted finally. That lunch turned into a series of casual encounters, quick coffees between appointments, conversations in the office pantry when everyone else had left, walks through downtown that extended well beyond business hours. Raphael discovered in Letitia a practical intelligence and a life wisdom that contrasted with the superficiality of the women he had known. She read voraciously, had her own opinions on politics and society, and possessed a natural empathy that touched him deeply. More importantly, she truly listened to him, without judgment, without preconceived expectations. Letitia, for her part, saw in Raphael much more than the successful lawyer. Behind the impeccable elegance, she discovered a sensitive man who questioned his own privilege and who seemed genuinely interested in being a better person. There was a vulnerability in his moments of honesty that made her want to protect him, even knowing he didn't need her protection. Months passed, and what had started as mutual attraction turned into something much deeper. They began meeting outside the office, walks in Forest Park on weekends, movie sessions at Pioneer Place Mall, dinners in simple restaurants where they could talk unhurriedly. Raphael took Letitia to see places in Portland she had only seen from afar: the Civic Auditorium, the museums in the Historic District, the bookstores on Maple Street. She took him to see her world: the Old Town Square Market on Sundays, the late-night pastry shops, the live music bars in the Hawthorne District. Together, they created a Portland that was uniquely theirs, made of small rituals and shared discoveries. The first kiss happened on an autumn afternoon, as they walked down Rose Street. Raphael had stopped to buy flowers for Letitia at a traditional florist, and when he turned to hand them to her, he found her smiling in a way that made his heart race. "No one has ever bought me flowers," she said, smelling the yellow tulips. "How is that possible?" Raphael asked, genuinely surprised. "Because I've never met anyone like you." The kiss was soft, careful, laden with all the feelings that had been growing between them for months. When they separated, both knew that something fundamental had changed between them. That night, Raphael called Letitia, and they talked for hours about dreams, fears, plans for the future. It was the first time Raphael could imagine a life different from the one Stella had planned for him. The next few months were the happiest either of them had experienced. Raphael introduced Letitia to Mrs. Connie on a Sunday afternoon, and the simple seamstress from Willow Creek, received the lawyer from Westlake with the genuine hospitality of someone who makes no distinction between people. She prepared a delicious lunch, showed photos of Letitia as a child, and told stories about her daughter's determination to study despite all the difficulties. Raphael left feeling impressed by the strength and dignity of that family, and Letitia realized that he had understood where her inner strength came from. Raphael's introduction to Stella, however, was a complete disaster. "A receptionist?" Stella asked, with a tone that made the word sound like a contagious disease. "Raphael, you can't be serious." "I am completely serious, Mother. Letitia is an extraordinary woman. She's intelligent, cultured, hard-working." "Raphael, dear," Stella interrupted, with that condescending tone she used when she wanted to appear patient. "You can have fun with this girl, but marry her. Think of our social position, what clients will say, the future of your children." "The future of my children depends on them having a mother who loves them, not on how many zeros she has in her bank account." The discussion dragged on for hours, with Stella using every argument she knew: class differences, family expectations, Raphael's career, what Portland society would think. But for the first time in his life, Raphael did not yield. "Mother, I'm going to marry Letitia, with or without your approval." Stella realized she had lost the control she had always exerted over her son, and that realization left her furious. But she was an intelligent and calculating woman, and she knew that direct confrontations rarely produced the desired results. "If that's truly what you want, Raphael," she said, feigning resignation, "then I will try to accept it. I just hope you don't regret it." Raphael interpreted that statement as a victory, but Letitia, who had grown up observing the nuances of human behavior, realized that this was not a surrender. It was a strategy. The wedding took place on a spring Saturday at the Rose Garden, in a simple but beautiful ceremony. Letitia wore a wedding dress that she and her mother had sewn together, simple but elegant, which enhanced her natural beauty. Raphael was radiant in the new suit he had bought specifically for that day, not caring that it wasn't an Italian designer label. There were few guests: Mrs. Connie, emotional in the front row, some colleagues from the office, Raphael's close friends, and Stella, who attended with a forced smile and a very expensive gift that seemed more a display of superiority than a gesture of affection. When the justice of the peace asked if Raphael accepted Letitia as his wife, he replied with a conviction that brought tears to her eyes. "I do, with all my heart." The reception was at a traditional steakhouse in the Alberta Arts District, with live music and that genuine joy that characterizes simple celebrations. Raphael danced with Mrs. Connie, who cried with emotion seeing her daughter so happy. Letitia chatted with Raphael's friends, who were impressed by her naturalness and intelligence. Stella left early, claiming a headache. The honeymoon was a weekend on the beaches of Cannon Beach, staying in a simple inn overlooking the bay. They walked on the sand, ate fresh fish at beachfront restaurants, and made love for the first time with the tenderness of those who knew they were building something for life. "You make me want to be a better man," Raphael said, his head resting on Letitia's chest as they listened to the sound of the waves. "You're already the best man I know," she replied, running her fingers through his hair. When they returned to Portland, they rented a small but cozy apartment in Laurelhurst in a simple building overlooking the street trees. It was a home built with love and limited resources, furniture bought little by little, decor made with creativity, and a happiness that didn't depend on luxuries. Raphael began working pro bono cases in underserved communities, influenced by Letitia's social conscience. She, in turn, found in Raphael the encouragement to dream of education again, and began giving private lessons to neighborhood children in her free time. They created simple and meaningful routines: breakfast together before work, walks in Forest Park on weekends, movie nights at home with stove-popped popcorn. It was a common life, by the standards of Raphael's social circles, but it was extraordinary for two hearts that had found each other. During their first year of marriage, they were completely happy. Raphael discovered he could be himself without masks or pretense, and Letitia blossomed in the security of a love that didn't judge her origins. But Stella watched everything from afar, waiting for the perfect opportunity to regain control over her son's life. And that opportunity arrived on a cold June morning when an elegant woman entered the law firm specifically looking for Raphael. Veronica Albright had been Raphael's colleague in law, school daughter of a traditional family from Salem, with a doctorate in international law and specializations from European universities. Intelligent, sophisticated, beautiful in a classic way that drew attention in any setting. And she had just returned to the United States after 5 years working in international firms. When Leticia announced the visitor's arrival, Raphael was genuinely surprised and pleased. Veronica had been one of the few people in college with whom he had managed to maintain interesting conversations, and he had missed her when she moved abroad. What Raphael didn't know was that Veronica hadn't appeared there by chance. Stella had contacted her weeks earlier, telling her about the mistake her son had made by marrying an unsuitable woman, and suggesting that perhaps it was time for someone to make him see reality. Veronica, who had always been in love with Raphael in college, saw this as the opportunity she had waited for years, and so began the plan that would destroy the happiness Raphael and Leticia had built together. Conversations with Veronica began completely innocently. She would appear at the office once or twice a week, always with some complex international law case that needed guidance on American legislation. Raphael was genuinely interested in the stories she told about working in London and Paris, about the differences between legal systems, about the intriguing cases she had followed in Europe. Leticia observed these visits with the naturalness of someone who completely trusted her husband. Veronica was always polite to her, greeting her cordially upon arrival and thanking her upon departure. It was impossible not to notice her elegance, the tailored suits, the Italian shoes, the fluent French she used on the phone. But Leticia felt no jealousy. Raphael had always been surrounded by sophisticated women, and she knew he had chosen her precisely because she was different from them. "How was the meeting with your colleague?" Leticia would ask when they got home at night, as they prepared dinner together in the apartment's small kitchen. "Interesting. She's helping me better understand international contracts. It's an area I need to develop," Raphael replied, chopping onions for the stir-fry. "Veronica has incredible experience. She worked on billion-dollar cases in Europe." Leticia nodded, focused on seasoning the chicken. Their life had a domestic harmony that she loved, cooking together, talking about their day, watching the local news while they hanked dinner. It was an intimacy built on small gestures, shared routines, the silent complicity of people who knew each other deeply. "Are you thinking of specializing in that area?" she asked, genuinely interested in her husband's professional plans. "Maybe. The firm could benefit from having someone with that knowledge, and it would be an opportunity for professional growth." What neither of them knew was that these seemingly casual conversations about work were carefully orchestrated by Stella and Veronica. Every visit to the office, every consultation about international law, every suggestion about specialization was part of a meticulously elaborated plan. Stella had established regular meetings with Veronica at the Commonwealth Club, where they would meet for tea and, in reality, strategize. The club was the perfect environment for these conversations, discreet, frequented only by Portland's elite, a place where no one would question two elegant ladies conversing in whispers. "He's getting interested in international cases," Veronica reported during one of these meetings, delicately stirring sugar into her Earl Grey tea. "I think I can suggest some working dinners to discuss partnerships." "Perfect," Stella replied, with that calculating smile she used when all the pieces on the chessboard were moving as planned. "Raphael has always been ambitious. If you can show him the opportunities he's missing by being limited by his current domestic situation, he'll start to question his choices. And if he doesn't question, then we'll help him question." The first working dinner took place on a Thursday in July. Veronica discreetly suggested that it would be interesting to discuss a possible partnership between Raphael's firm and some contacts she had in Europe, but that the conversation needed to happen in a more private setting than the office. Raphael found the proposal perfectly reasonable. These were legitimate professional matters, and business dinners were part of any successful lawyer's routine. He called Leticia late that afternoon, explaining that he had a professional engagement and would be home late. "That's fine," Leticia said without any suspicion. I'll leave your dinner in the fridge in case you get hungry. The restaurant chosen by Veronica was one of the most sophisticated in Portland, in the Westlake neighborhood, frequented by the city's economic elite. Raphael felt a little uncomfortable with the ostentation of the place. Ever since he married Letitia, he had developed an aversion to excessively formal environments. But he understood that important business sometimes required appropriate settings. Veronica arrived dazzling, wearing an elegant black dress that accentuated her impeccable figure. During dinner, she was brilliant. She spoke about investment opportunities, about European clients who might interest the firm, about the possibility of Raphael specializing abroad. "You have incredible potential, Raphael," she said, leaning slightly across the table. "But you're limiting yourself to local cases. With your intelligence and charisma, you could be working with major multinational corporations." "It's an interesting prospect," Raphael admitted, genuinely intrigued by the possibilities she presented. "Of course, it would be a large initial investment," Veronica continued. "Travel to establish contacts, specialization courses, time to build an international reputation, but the return would be extraordinary." Raphael thought of the simple apartment in Laurelhurst, the modest but happy life he led with Letitia, the plans they had made together to buy a small house with a yard where she could have a garden. They weren't grand dreams, but they were their dreams. "It would be complicated right now," he said. "Letitia and I are building our life together, planning the future." Veronica noticed the opening she had been waiting for. "Of course, I understand perfectly. It's natural that you want to consider the limitations of the situation." The word limitations hung in the air like a poisonous seed. Raphael frowned, bothered by the insinuation. "What limitations?" "Oh, Raphael, I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything offensive. It's just that, well, Letitia is a lovely person, I'm sure, but she comes from a very different world than ours. Perhaps she doesn't fully understand the ambitions you could have." "Letitia supports me in everything," Raphael defended. But there was a note of irritation in his voice that Veronica did not let go unnoticed. "Of course she does. It's just that sometimes the people we love end up being involuntary anchors, not out of malice, but because they don't fully understand our potential." Raphael finished dinner, bothered by the conversation, but Veronica's words echoed in his mind on the way home. When he arrived at the apartment, he found Letitia asleep with a book on early childhood education on her chest, the dinner table set for two, even though she knew he wouldn't be back in time. She woke when she felt his movement in the room, smiling sleepily. "How was dinner?" "Productive," Raphael said, but there was something different in his voice, a distance Letitia couldn't identify. In the weeks that followed, the working dinners became more frequent. Veronica always had new contacts to introduce, new opportunities to discuss, new perspectives on Raphael's professional future. And gradually she began to introduce subtle comments about his personal life. "You seem tired lately," she observed during one of these meetings. "Are you not putting too much pressure on yourself to maintain a standard of living that, well, that might not be natural for you?" "What do you mean?" "Raphael, you grew up with certain expectations, certain standards. It's natural to feel limited in an environment where you constantly have to adapt downwards." "I don't feel limited," Raphael said, but there was defensiveness in his voice that indicated the words had found some internal echo. "Of course not. You're too generous to admit that. But does Letitia really understand the world where you could shine? The opportunities you're missing?" These conversations accumulated like drips that slowly weaken a structure. Raphael began to come home later, more distant, more irritated by small details of domestic life that had once charmed him. Letitia noticed the change, but couldn't identify the cause. Raphael was working more. That was evident, but there was something different in his behavior that made her uneasy. "Are you all right?" she asked one night when he was idly stirring his food, unable to focus on the conversation. "I'm fine, just thinking about work." "Do you want to talk about it? Sometimes sharing worries helps." Raphael looked at her for a moment, noticing the concerned sincerity in her green eyes. For an instant, he was about to tell her about the conversations with Veronica, about the doubts she had planted, about the growing feeling that he might be missing important opportunities. But then, He remembered Veronica's words about limitations and adapting downwards, and decided that Letitia truly wouldn't understand the complexities of his professional situation. "It's nothing you can help with," he said, returning to his food. The phrase hit Letitia like a slap. In all the time they had been together, Raphael had never excluded her from his worries. They had always shared everything, worked together to solve problems, supported each other unconditionally. "Why are you talking to me like that?" she asked, with a small voice that made Raphael's heart clench with remorse. "Sorry. I'm stressed. I didn't mean it." But the damage was done. For the first time since they met, there was an uncomfortable silence between them. Meanwhile, Stella escalated the second phase of her plan. She began to appear at the office more frequently, always with some excuse. Documents for Raphael to sign, invitations to social events, family matters to discuss. During these visits, she carefully observed the interactions between him and Veronica, noting how his former college colleague had captured her son's attention and admiration. "Raphael seems more animated lately," she commented to Letitia during one of the rare occasions they met. "It must be because of the new international projects." "Yes, he's been working a lot," Letitia replied, not mentioning the growing tensions at home. "It's so good to see him realizing his potential. I always knew he was destined for great things." Stella paused calculatedly. "Of course, these projects require a certain kind of sophistication, knowledge of international protocol, cultural fluency, those sorts of things." Letitia felt her stomach clench. She spoke English reasonably well, but had no experience with international etiquette or European culture. She began to wonder if she truly was an impediment to her husband's ambitions. "Raphael has always been very adaptable," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, very generous, perhaps too generous at times." Stella smiled with that falseness Letitia had learned to recognize. "But I think now he's finding people who truly understand his worth." That night, Letitia tried to talk to Raphael about the international projects, to show interest and support, but he seemed irritated by her questions, as if she were invading territory where she didn't belong. "You wouldn't understand the complexities involved," he said, inadvertently echoing the words Veronica had planted in his mind. "Try to explain it to me," Letitia insisted. "I want to understand what's important to you." "Letitia, these are very technical matters, very specific to the international corporate environment. It's not something that—" He stopped mid-sentence, realizing what he was about to say, but it was too late. Letitia had perfectly understood the message. She wasn't sophisticated enough to comprehend his world. "I see," she said, getting up from the dinner table. "I'll do the dishes." She went to the kitchen with tears in her eyes, feeling as if the ground were disintegrating beneath her feet. The man who had once said she made him want to be better now treated her as if she were an obstacle to his growth. Raphael remained alone at the table, looking at the food that had grown cold, feeling that he had lost something important, but not knowing exactly what. In the bedroom, later, they lay on opposite sides of the bed, for the first time not embracing before sleep. The silence between them was heavy with unexpressed grievances and misunderstandings that grew in the darkness. It was exactly what Stella and Veronica had planned, to create small but constant fissures that would slowly crack the foundations of the marriage. And they were just getting started. The next day, Veronica appeared at the office with an even bolder proposal, an international law conference in Vancouver, where Raphael could establish important contacts and present a paper on American legislation. "It would be a unique opportunity," she said, sitting in the chair opposite his desk, crossing her legs in a way that drew attention to her elegant posture. 3 days of intensive networking with the best professionals in North America. "Sounds interesting," Raphael admitted, flipping through the material she had brought. "But it would be expensive, and I'd have to be away from the office." "Raphael," Veronica interrupted, leaning forward with an expression of someone about to give important advice. "You need to stop thinking small. Career investments always require initial sacrifices. It's not about thinking small, it's about responsibility. I have commitments here. With the firm or with other things." The question hung in the air, laden with innuendo. Raphael knew exactly what she was referring to, but he didn't want to admit that his personal life might be interfering with his professional decisions. "With both," he said finally. "Raphael, may I be frank with you?" He nodded, though he already knew that. Veronica's frankness always came accompanied by subtle poison. "You are limiting yourself, and it's not for lack of ability or ambition. It's because of loyalties that may not be reciprocated in the same way." "What do you mean?" "Would Letitia make the same sacrifices for you that you are making for her?" The question hit Raphael at a vulnerable point. In recent days, he had felt misunderstood at home, as if his professional ambitions were seen as unnecessary whims. He began to wonder if Letitia truly supported his dreams, or if she merely tolerated them. "Of course she would," he said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "I'm sure she would," Veronica agreed, with a tone that suggested exactly the opposite. "It's just that, well, sometimes love isn't enough to fill all the gaps, especially when there are very big differences in perspective." Raphael left the office that day with his head full of doubts he hadn't had before meeting Veronica. For the first time since his marriage, he began to wonder if he had made the right choice, if he had traded his professional potential for a domestic happiness that might just be mediocrity in disguise. When he arrived home, he found Letitia preparing a special dinner. She had spent the entire afternoon cooking his favorite dish, trying to regain the intimacy she felt she was losing. "Surprise," she said, smiling nervously. "I made that lasagna you love." Raphael looked at the carefully set table, at his wife who was desperately trying to please him, and instead of feeling affection, he felt an inexplicable irritation. It was as if all those domestic gestures were symbols of the chains that bound him to a small life. "Letitia, I need to tell you something," he said with a seriousness that made her stomach churn. The conversation about Vancouver that night was the first major open confrontation between Raphael and Letitia. She had prepared the special dinner, hoping for a romantic evening, an opportunity to reconnect with her husband, who seemed to be drifting further away each day. Instead, she found a tense man, eager for discussions she didn't fully understand. "It's a unique opportunity," Raphael explained, nervously fidgeting with his fork as he talked about the conference. 3 days that could completely change the course of my career." "I understand," Letitia said, genuinely trying to support him. "If it's important to you, then you should go." "Really?" Raphael looked at her with surprise, as if expecting resistance. "Of course. Why would I oppose something that could benefit you professionally?" Raphael was silent for a moment, processing the answer. Veronica's words about limitations and unreciprocated loyalties echoed in his mind, but Letitia's reaction didn't fit the narrative he had built. "It's just that it will be expensive, and I'll be away for 3 days. Raphael, we can manage the money, and 3 days is nothing if it's for something important." Letitia leaned across the table, touching his hand. "I support you. In everything, you know that." For a moment, Raphael felt a wave of affection for his wife, a reminder of why he had fallen in love with her. But then he remembered Veronica's insinuations about differences in perspective and wondered if Letitia truly understood what that opportunity meant to him. "Do you really understand?" he asked with a tone Letitia couldn't interpret. "Understand what?" "What this represents, the kind of career I could have, the places this could take me." Letitia frowned, confused by the unnecessary intensity of the question. "Raphael, I've always known you're ambitious. I've never tried to stop you from anything. I'm not talking about stopping, I'm talking about understanding, about being a part of it." "What do you mean, being a part of it?" Raphael hesitated, realizing he was treading on dangerous ground, but weeks of conversation with Veronica had planted doubts that now demanded answers. "Letitia, have you ever wondered if we're compatible? Not just romantically, but in terms of ambitions, life goals?" The question hit Letitia like a punch to the stomach. In her entire life, she had never doubted their compatibility. They were different in origins, but they shared values, dreams, visions for the future. "Where is this coming from?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's just that lately I've been thinking a lot about the future, about where I want to be in 5, 10 years, And I wonder if you'll be able to keep up. Keep up with what, Raphael? Keep up where? The kind of life I could have. The social circles, international travel, high-level professional commitments. Letitia stared at him in silence for a long moment, trying to recognize the man she had married in the words she was hearing. You're talking as if I'm a burden, she said finally. It's not that, Yes, it is. Letitia's voice was low but firm. You're telling me I'm not sophisticated enough for the future you want. Raphael didn't answer, and the silence was more eloquent than any words. Letitia got up from the table, clearing away the dinner plates she had prepared with so much care. The lasagna was great, she said, with a calm that contrasted with the pain in her eyes. Too bad you were too busy planning your new life to notice. That night, they slept on opposite sides of the bed, with a distance between them. That seemed insurmountable. What neither of them knew was that Stella and Veronica had decided to accelerate the plan. The fissures in the marriage were opening, but not yet enough to ensure the desired outcome. It was time for more drastic measures. The idea came during one of their secret meetings at the Commonwealth Club. Stella watched Veronica thoughtfully stir her tea, both calculating their next steps. He still loves her, Veronica observed. Even with all the doubts we've planted, there's still a lot of feeling there. Then we need something more definitive, Stella replied. Something that makes it impossible for him to rationalize or excuse. What do you have in mind? Raphael has always been very rational, very analytical. If we present concrete evidence that she's cheating on him, he won't be able to ignore it. But she's not cheating. Stella smiled with that coldness that characterized her most elaborate manipulations. She doesn't have to be. She just needs to appear to be. The plan they devised was simple but effective. Veronica had noticed that Letitia frequently ate lunch at a diner near the office, always alone, always with a book. She had also observed that one of the waiters, a young and friendly man, always greeted her with special attention. What was simply the courtesy of an experienced employee would be transformed into evidence of an extramarital affair. Veronica began frequenting the same diner, always with her phone in hand, taking discreet photos. Letitia talking to the waiter. Letitia smiling at him when she received a complimentary coffee. Letitia waving goodbye as she left, and the waiter waving back. Completely innocent photos that, viewed out of context, could suggest intimacy. But Veronica didn't stop there. During one of her visits to the office, she forgot her phone on Raphael's desk. When he returned it the next day, she acted as if she had just received a disturbing message. Raphael, I don't know if I should tell you this. Tell me what? Veronica made an expression of someone facing a moral dilemma. It's about Letitia. I didn't want to believe it, but... Veronica, what is it? A friend of mine saw her at a cafe near the office, very intimate with a man. I didn't want to tell you because I know how close you two are. But she insisted I should know. Raphael felt stomach churn. What kind of intimacy? Long conversations, laughter, touching. Raphael, I might be misinterpreting, but... Are you sure? Veronica hesitated, as if struggling with herself. I have some photos. My friend was worried and, well, took some pictures. But maybe it's better if you don't see them. I want to see them. With feigned reluctance, Veronica showed him the photos on her phone. Raphael saw Letitia smiling at the waiter, the two talking, her waving affectionately as she left. Viewed through the lens of suspicion that Veronica had planted, the images seemed to confirm the worst possibilities. It could just be friendship, Veronica said, with a tone that suggested exactly the opposite. But Raphael, considering how distant she's been lately. Raphael remembered the recent tensions at home, the difficult conversations, the feeling that Letitia no longer understood him. Suddenly everything seemed to make sense. She was pulling away from him because she had found someone else. Who is he? Raphael asked, his voice harsh. I don't know. I just know she goes there every week. That night, Raphael arrived home with the images burning in his mind. Letitia was in the kitchen, preparing dinner as usual, softly humming a song he used to find charming. Now her joy seemed like a farce. "How was your day?" she asked, smiling as he entered the kitchen. "Good," Raphael lied. "And yours?" "Quiet. I had lunch at the usual diner, read a bit." The mention of lunch made Raphael's blood boil. She was lying by omission, hiding the encounters Veronica had documented. "Always the same diner?" "It's near work, and they make a really good sandwich." Letitia didn't notice the growing tension in her husband's voice. "The waiter there is very friendly, always asks how I am." To Raphael, that sounded like confirmation of intimacy. "Which waiter?" Letitia finally realized something was wrong. "Raphael, what is it?" "Nothing, just curious." But his voice was cold, distant, laden with unexpressed accusations. Letitia tried to approach him, to touch him, but he instinctively recoiled. "You're acting strange," she observed. "Did something happen?" Should something have happened? The question came charged with a hostility that made Letitia step back. "Raphael, I don't understand what's going on. Why are you being like this with me?" "Like what?" "Aggressive, distant, as if I've done something wrong." Raphael stared at her for a long moment, torn between the urge to confront her directly and the fear of discovering a truth that would destroy everything between them. "Maybe you have," he said finally. The weeks that followed were a silent hell. Raphael observed Letitia's every move, interpreted every word through the lens of suspicion, sought confirmation for the accusations he didn't dare make openly. Letitia, in turn, felt as if she were walking through a minefield. Anything she said was met with coldness. Any gesture of affection was rejected. Any attempt at conversation was interrupted by hostile silences. She began to sleep poorly, lose weight, constantly question what she had done to deserve such treatment. She tried to talk to her mother about the situation, but Mrs. Connie, always practical, suggested that it might just be a rough patch all marriages go through. "Men sometimes get strange because of work," her mother said. "Your father also had those phases. It passes." But Letitia felt deep in her heart that this was different. Something was broken in the way Raphael looked at her, as if she were a stranger who had invaded his life. The final explosion happened on a rainy September night. Raphael had gone out for another working dinner with Veronica. Returning home after midnight, visibly disturbed, he found Letitia waiting for him in the living room, still dressed, her eyes red from crying. "We need to talk," she said, standing up when she saw him enter. "It's late, Letitia. I'm tired." "Raphael, please, I can't take this situation anymore. You're treating me like your enemy." "Maybe you are." The words came out harsher than Raphael intended, but once spoken, there was no taking them back. Letitia stared at him with an expression of deep pain that made his chest clench with remorse and anger at the same time. "How can you say such a thing?" she whispered. "Because I don't know who you are anymore," Raphael said, letting all the frustration and suspicion of the past months explode. "I don't know what to believe anymore when it comes to you." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your lunches, Letitia. I'm talking about your intimacy with other men while pretending to be a devoted wife at home." Letitia looked at him with complete perplexity. "What intimacy? What men? Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." "Raphael, I swear I don't know. Are you talking about my lunches at the diner? Is that it?" "I'm talking about the way you smile at him, the way you talk, the way you hide it from me." The realization of what was happening hit Letitia like a cold wave. "Are you talking about Michael, the waiter at the diner?" "Ah, so he has a name." "Raphael, he's just a friendly waiter. We talk about the weather, about the sandwiches, about trivial things. How can you possibly think that?" "Because I saw the pictures, Letitia. I saw the way you look at each other." "What pictures?" Raphael was so consumed by anger and pain that he didn't stop to question how those photos had been taken or why. He was blinded by the manipulation he had suffered, unable to see that he was destroying everything most precious in his life. "It doesn't matter how I found out. What matters is that you're cheating on me." "I am not cheating on you." Letitia's voice echoed through the apartment, laden with an anguish that came from the depths of her soul. "Raphael, how can you believe such a thing? How can you accuse me without even asking me?" "Because I don't trust you anymore." The 5 words fell between them like a death sentence. Letitia felt as if the ground had opened beneath her feet, as if everything she had built with so much love was collapsing in a matter of seconds. "Raphael," she said, her voice broken, "look me in the eyes and tell me you truly believe I would be capable of cheating on you." Raphael looked at her tear-streaked face, at the green eyes that had always looked at him with so much love, at the woman who had been his companion, his best friend, his reason for waking up happy every day. And for a terrible moment he saw the truth, that she was telling the truth, that she was innocent of any betrayal. But the weeks of manipulation, Veronica's constant insinuations, the doubts planted by his mother, had created a poison in his mind that clouded his ability to reason clearly. Instead of listening to his heart, he chose to listen to fear. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said, with a coldness that hid his own pain. Letitia looked at him for a long moment, seeing the man she loved choose to destroy everything they had built together. Slowly she nodded, as if finally understanding that the battle was lost. "Then there's nothing more for us to talk about," she said, with a broken dignity that broke both their hearts. "Letitia—" "No." She raised her hand, interrupting him. "If you don't trust me, if you believe I'm capable of cheating on you, then our marriage is over." She went to the bedroom, grabbed a small suitcase, and began packing some clothes. Raphael remained in the living room, paralyzed by the magnitude of what was happening, wanting to stop everything but not knowing how to go back. When Letitia came out of the bedroom with the suitcase in her hand, she paused at the living room door to look at him one last time. "I loved you more than anything in my life," she said, with a voice that was pure heartbreak and disillusionment. "And you threw it all away because of pictures of me drinking coffee." "Letitia, wait." But she had already left, closing the door behind her, with a gentleness that was more painful than any slam. Raphael was left alone in the apartment that had been their home, surrounded by the vestiges of a life he himself had destroyed. For the first time in weeks, the silence in his mind allowed him to hear his own conscience, and what he heard terrified him. He had driven out the woman he loved most in the world, based on fabricated suspicions and manipulated insecurities. He had chosen to believe the insinuations of others instead of trusting the person who had been his unconditional companion. But it was too late. Letitia had left his life, and he didn't know how to get her back. Meanwhile, Letitia made her way to the only place she knew she would be received without questions, her mother's house in Willow Creek. Throughout the bus ride under the fine Portland rain, she tried to process what had happened, how her marriage had turned into a nightmare in a matter of weeks. Mrs. Connie received her daughter with a heavy heart, without asking questions, only offering comfort and warm tea. That night, Letitia cried all the tears she had held back during months of tension, all the hopes she had nurtured of winning her husband back, all the pain of being rejected by the man she had chosen to love forever. 3 weeks later, when the pain was still an open wound but she had managed to find the strength to get out of bed and look for a job, Letitia discovered she was pregnant. Alone in her mother's bathroom, looking at the pregnancy test that showed 2 clear lines, she felt the world collapse for the second time in less than a month. She carried in her womb the child of the man who had driven her from her home, who had destroyed her life based on lies he preferred to believe rather than trust her. And now she would have to decide alone what to do with this child, who had been conceived in love, but discovered in the deepest pain she had ever experienced. The winter of 2019 was the harshest Letitia had ever faced, not just because of the biting cold that covered Portland with a layer of frost every morning, but because of the ice that had settled in her heart. 3 months had passed since she discovered her pregnancy, and each day was a silent struggle to find strength she didn't even know she possessed. Mrs. Connie's house in Willow Creek, always small but welcoming, now sheltered 2 women trying to rebuild lives that had been shattered by men they loved. Her mother had never asked questions about the sudden end of her daughter's marriage, but her calloused hands spoke for themselves. Chamomile teas when Letitia couldn't sleep, nutritious soups when morning sickness prevented her from eating, silent presences in moments when tears came unannounced. "Daughter," Mrs. Connie said one morning when she found Letitia vomiting in the small bathroom. "You need to tell me if he knows about the baby." Letitia wiped her mouth with a towel, observing her reflection in the old mirror hanging on the wall. Her face was thinner, her deep-set eyes had dark circles, but it was in her belly that the most significant change manifested, a small curve that announced the life growing inside her. "He doesn't know," she replied, instinctively touching her belly. "And he won't know." "Letitia." "Mother, he threw me out of the house believing I was cheating on him. He chose to trust anyone but me." Her voice was firm, but Mrs. Connie could see the pain throbbing beneath the determination. "He forfeited the right to know anything about my life." Mrs. Connie nodded slowly, recognizing in her daughter the same stubbornness she herself had inherited from the women in their family. "And how will you support yourself?" It was the question that tormented Letitia every night. The money she had saved during her marriage was quickly running out, and finding a job was proving harder than she had imagined. Many interviewers showed interest until they realized she was pregnant. Then, the polite excuses began to appear. "I'll manage," she said, with more confidence than she truly felt. It was during one of these desperate job searches that Letitia met Mr. Anthony, owner of a small diner in St. John's. He was a man in his 60s, widowed 5 years prior, who ran the establishment with the sporadic help of temporary employees. When he saw Letitia timidly enter, asking about the attendant vacancy advertised in the window, he immediately noticed the signs: the discreet but evident belly, the nervousness of someone desperately needing work, the silent dignity of someone not asking for a favor. "The position pays little," he said, studying her with kind eyes. "And business is slow in winter. Are you sure you want to work here?" "Yes," Letitia replied with a firmness that impressed him. "Are you expecting a baby?" The direct question caught her off guard, but she decided to be honest. "I am. 3 months along." Mr. Anthony nodded thoughtfully. "My late wife was pregnant 3 times. I know how difficult it is for a woman in your condition to find work." He paused, observing the hope that shone in Letitia's green eyes. "The job is yours, if you want it. And when the baby is born, we'll figure out a way to reconcile schedules." Letitia felt tears well up in her eyes. For months, no one had shown her such kindness, such willingness to help without expecting anything in return. "Thank you very much," she managed to say, her voice choked. "No need to thank me. Just make good coffee and treat the customers well." Mr. Anthony's diner became much more than a job for Letitia. It became a refuge. The environment was simple but clean, frequented by local workers, retirees who came to play dominoes, and students who took advantage of the affordable prices. There was a genuine humanity in that place that contrasted painfully with the corporate coldness she had known at the law firm. During the first few weeks, Letitia dedicated herself to work with an intensity that impressed Mr. Anthony. She arrived early, cleaned everything meticulously, and quickly memorized the names and preferences of regular customers. It was as if she was trying to fill the immense void Raphael had left in her life with constant activity. But it was impossible to completely ignore the past. Several times a week, someone would casually mention some news about Miller & Associates, a case Raphael had won, an international partnership he was developing, his growing reputation in criminal law. Letitia heard this, information with a pang in her chest, a mixture of wounded pride and longing that she tried to suppress. Her belly grew along with the winter, and with it came the curious comments from regular customers. Mr. Anthony always defended her discreetly, changing the subject when someone showed excessive interest in her personal life. Gradually, she became beloved in the local community, known for her consistently gentle service and the way she remembered details of each customer's life. "The girl is a blessing," commented Mrs. Mary, a retiree who frequented the diner every morning, polite, hard-working, and with that beautiful belly. "The child's father must be a happy man." Letitia smiled politely and changed the subject, but inside she felt a stab of pain every time someone mentioned the baby's father. Alone at night, in her narrow bed in the room she shared with her mother's sewing machines, she would talk softly to the child growing in her womb. "It'll just be the 2 of us," she murmured, her hands resting on her belly. "But I promise you'll have so much love. You'll have everything I can give." Meanwhile, Raphael was going through his own silent demons. The apartment in Laurelhurst had become a museum of regrets, full of traces of the life he had destroyed. Letitia's clothes still hanging in the closet, her books stacked on the bedside table, her favorite cup he didn't dare put away. Every object was a silent accusation of his own blindness. Dinners with Veronica had continued, but Raphael realized he no longer felt the same enthusiasm for international projects. Without Letitia to share his victories and worries, professional success seemed empty, mechanical. He won important cases, increased his bank account, received praise from colleagues, but returned home every night to a silence that screamed her absence. "You seem distant," Veronica observed during a dinner in late August. "Are you still thinking about her?" Raphael looked through the window of the sophisticated restaurant, watching the fine rain fall on the streets of Portland. "Sometimes. Raphael, you need to move on. What happened was painful, but it was necessary. You found out who she really was before she caused greater damage." The words should have been comforting, but something about them bothered Raphael in a way he couldn't identify. Greater damage? Imagine if you had discovered the betrayal after having children with her, or after investing even more in the relationship. Raphael remained silent, idly stirring the plate of food he had barely touched. The mention of children stirred an unexpected pain. He and Letitia had talked about having children, dreamed of a small but happy family. Now those dreams seemed to belong to another life. "Are you sure about those photos?" he asked suddenly. Veronica almost choked on her wine. "What do you mean?" "The photos your friend took. Are you sure they showed what you thought they showed?" "Raphael, why are you questioning this now?" "Because—" He hesitated, trying to put into words a feeling that had been growing in recent weeks. "Because I knew Letitia for 2 years before we got married. She wasn't the kind of person who would do that. People change, Raphael, especially when they feel limited." There was that word again. Limited. Raphael began to notice how Veronica always used terms that diminished Letitia, that suggested she had been an obstacle in his life, and for the first time he wondered where these ideas truly came from. "Who was this friend of yours who took the photos? Why does that matter now?" "I just want to—" "No." Veronica hesitated for a few seconds, searching for a convincing answer. She prefers not to get involved. You understand, right? It's a delicate situation." Raphael nodded, but an uncomfortable suspicion began to form in his mind. That night, he went straight home without accompanying Veronica to her car as he usually did. Locked in the empty apartment, he began to methodically review all the conversations he had had with her in recent weeks. It was then that he noticed a disturbing pattern. All the doubts about Letitia had arisen after Veronica appeared in his life. Before that, he had been completely happy in his marriage, confident in his choices, proud of the woman with whom he had chosen to build a life. The revelation came unexpectedly during a routine visit Stella made to the office the following week. She brought some documents for Raphael to sign, investments she managed on his behalf, and took the opportunity for one of her usual manipulative conversations. "How are the projects with Veronica going?" she asked, with that casual tone she used when she wanted to gather information. "Well," Raphael replied, but there was little enthusiasm in his voice. "That's good. She's so much more suited to your ambitions than the previous situation." Raphael looked up from the documents, observing his mother with new attention. "Previous situation?" "Your marriage, dear. No need to pretend it wasn't a relief to be free of that complication." "Complication?" Stella realized she had said more than she should have, but it was too late to backtrack. "Raphael, you know I never approved of that marriage. Letitia was a sweet girl, but completely unsuitable for someone of your position. And so you did what exactly?" The question came charged with a suspicion Stella couldn't ignore. "I didn't do anything, Raphael. I just guided you so you could see the situation more clearly." "Guided me how?" "We talked about the differences between you, about how she might be limiting your growth." Raphael stopped pretending to read the documents and stared directly at his mother. "You talked to Veronica about Leticia and me?" The silence that followed was more eloquent than any confession. Stella realized she had been discovered, but her arrogance prevented her from showing remorse. "Raphael, everything we did was for your own good." "Everything you did? Who else was involved in this?" "Veronica merely agreed to help you see what kind of woman was more suitable for your life plans." The anger that exploded in Raphael's chest was unlike anything he had ever felt. It wasn't just anger at the manipulation, but a visceral fury of someone who realizes they destroyed the most precious thing in their life because of carefully planted lies. "Where are the photos Veronica showed me?" "What photos?" "The photos of Leticia with another man." Stella seemed genuinely confused. "I don't know what photos you're talking about." Raphael picked up his phone and called Veronica, putting it on speakerphone. When she answered, her voice was cheerful, as it always was when she spoke to him. "Raphael, what a surprise. How are you?" "Veronica, I need you to come to my office now. Bring your phone with Leticia's photos." "Why? Did something happen?" "Just come, it's important." When Veronica arrived, she found Raphael and Stella waiting for her with expressions she couldn't interpret. The tension in the air was palpable, and she immediately realized something had gone wrong. "Show my mother the photos," Raphael said without preamble. "Raphael, I don't understand." "The photos your friend took of Leticia with another man. Show them to her." Veronica hesitated, realizing she was being cornered. "Why would that be necessary?" "Because my mother doesn't know what photos I'm talking about, and that makes me question if they really existed." The silence that followed was thick as lead. Veronica looked at Stella, searching for some sign of how to proceed, but the older woman's expression indicated that she too had been caught off guard. "Veronica," Raphael said with a dangerous calm, "who took those photos?" I already explained." "Who? What's your friend's name?" "Raphael. Why does that matter now?" "Because I want to call her and thank her personally for destroying my marriage." Veronica realized there was no longer any way to sustain the farce. She looked at Stella, who made an almost imperceptible gesture for her to confess. "I took the photos," she admitted, finally. Raphael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "You?" "Raphael, I can explain." "Explain." Veronica took a deep breath, trying to find words that could minimize the gravity of what she had done. "I was worried about you. I saw how you were limiting yourself, how you were wasting your potential, and when I observed Leticia, you were following my wife. I was trying to understand why you had chosen someone so unsuitable for you. And the photos, they were innocent, I know, but you were so blinded by passion that you couldn't see what kind of woman she really was. I thought that maybe if you saw evidence that she wasn't so perfect." Raphael didn't let her finish. He advanced on Veronica with a fury that startled even Stella. "You destroyed my marriage with deliberate lies." "Raphael, I did it for you." "For me?" His voice echoed through the office. "You made me throw out the woman I loved based on fabricated lies, and you say it was for me. You'll thank me when you realize what kind of life you can have now." Raphael grabbed Veronica by the arm, his hands trembling with rage. "Where is Leticia?" "I don't know. Where is she?" "Raphael, calm down," Stella tried, realizing the situation was getting out of control. "No!" he shouted, turning to his mother. "You're involved in this too. You two destroyed my life." "We saved your life," Stella retorted, losing her composure. "That girl was going to drag you down. She was going to keep you mediocre forever." "Mediocre?" Raphael looked at his mother with an expression of absolute disgust. "I was happy. I had a wife who loved me, a life that made sense, plans that really mattered, and you destroyed everything because you think you know what's best for me." He headed for the door, stopping only to look back one last time. "I never want to see either of you in my life again. Never." Raphael spent the next few days in a desperate search for Leticia. He called the office where she had worked and discovered she had resigned shortly after leaving home. He tried to contact Mrs. Connie, but the number had changed. He searched the neighborhoods where she might have gone, asked mutual acquaintances, scoured social media without finding any trace. It was as if she had simply disappeared from Portland. It was on a rainy September afternoon that chance brought them face to face. Raphael had gone out for lunch, walking aimlessly through the downtown streets, when the rain forced him to take refuge in the first establishment he found. It was a small diner in St. John's, simple but clean, with the homey smell of lovingly prepared food. When he entered, shaking the water from his coat, Raphael looked up and felt the world stop around him. Letitia was behind the counter, serving coffee to a customer, and the first thing he noticed was the rounded belly that gently distorted her apron. She was pregnant, very pregnant. Their eyes met across the small space of the diner, and for a moment that seemed to last an eternity, the external world ceased to exist. There was only the two of them, a few feet apart, and a belly that told a story Raphael had not yet fully processed. Letitia was the first to react. Without saying a word, she untied her apron, left it on the counter, and ran to the back of the diner. Raphael stood still at the entrance, drenched by the rain, watching the space where she had disappeared, trying to process what he had just seen. Mr. Anthony, who was in the kitchen when he noticed the commotion, appeared at the counter with a worried expression. "Can I help you with anything?" Raphael looked at the older man, then towards the back of the diner, then back at the man. "The young lady who was here, is she okay?" Mr. Anthony studied Raphael with experienced eyes, noticing his devastated expression, his trembling hands, the way he looked towards the back of the diner, as if his life depended on it. "Depends," he said, with the wisdom of someone who had seen a lot in life. "Are you who I think you are?" Raphael nodded slowly, unable to lie. "Then no," Mr. Anthony said. "She's not okay, and I think you'd better leave." "Please," Raphael managed to say, his voice pure desperation. "I need to talk to her." "Young man, you've done enough harm to that girl. Leave her in peace." "I found out the truth," Raphael said, taking a step towards the counter. "About the lies, about the manipulation. I know she didn't do anything wrong." Mr. Anthony observed him for a long moment, seeing something in the young man's expression that made him hesitate. "And the baby?" he asked, testing him. "Is it mine?" Raphael asked, though he already knew the answer deep in his heart. "That's a question you'll have to ask her." Raphael nodded, understanding that he had lost the right to easy answers. "Will she talk to me?" "I don't know, but she's been suffering for months, young man. If you only came here to cause more pain, you'd better leave now." "I came to try and fix everything." Mr. Anthony looked at the young lawyer dripping rainwater onto his diner floor, seeing something in him he recognized, the desperation of a man who had lost everything that truly mattered. "Wait here," he said finally. "I'll see if she wants to talk to you." Letitia was sitting on an old chair in the back of the diner, her hands resting on her nearly 8-month belly, trying to control her breathing, which had become irregular since the moment she saw Raphael at the door. Mr. Anthony approached her carefully, as if dealing with a wounded animal. "Daughter," he said, crouching beside the chair, "he wants to talk to you." "No," Letitia replied without hesitation. "I have nothing to say to him. He said he found out the truth about lies, manipulation. He seemed, regretful." Letitia looked up to meet the kind gaze of the man who had become a father figure to her in recent months. "Mr. Anthony, it doesn't matter what he found out. What matters is that when he had to choose between trusting me or trusting strangers, he chose strangers." "And the baby?" The question she had avoided answering, even to herself, for 8 whole months. Letitia touched her belly instinctively, feeling the child stir as if responding to her mother's tension. "The baby is mine," she said, with a firmness that hid the storm of emotions in her chest. "He forfeited the right to be a father when he threw me out of the house." Mr. Anthony nodded, but there was a thoughtful expression on his face. "Daughter, I'm not defending the young man. On the contrary, if it were up to me, I'd kick him out of here, but I've seen many regretful men in my life. Most were sorry for being caught, not for doing wrong. But that young man out there, he looks like he's destroyed by what he did." Letitia remained silent for a long moment, listening to the sound of the rain still falling outside and the muffled noises of the diner functioning. Finally, she sighed deeply. "Tell him to come in, but stay nearby in case I need you." Mr. Anthony nodded and went to get Raphael, who had remained standing in the same spot, as if moving might break some fragile spell that kept him in the same environment as Letitia. When Raphael appeared in the small back area, Letitia had to muster all her willpower not to show how his presence still affected her. He was thinner, paler, with deep dark circles under his eyes that indicated sleepless nights. There was something broken in his posture that contrasted with the confidence that had always characterized him. But it was the way his eyes immediately fixed on her belly that made Letitia's heart race. "Hi," he said, his voice little more than a whisper. "Hi," she replied, keeping her hands protectively over her belly. Raphael took a hesitant step towards her, but stopped when he saw Letitia instinctively recoil. "Can you tell me about the baby?" "No." The answer came quick and definitive, leaving no room for negotiation. Raphael felt as if he had been slapped, but he knew he deserved much worse. "Letitia, I found out about the lies, about how my mother and Veronica planned everything to separate us, about the fake photos, the insinuations. And does that change anything?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean? Raphael, do you really think the problem was that they lied?" Letitia leaned slightly forward, and there was a coldness in her green eyes that he had never seen before. "The problem was that you believed them. The problem was that you chose to suspect me instead of trusting me. They were very convincing." "Convincing?" Letitia's voice rose slightly, laden with an indignation that had been repressed for months. "Raphael, I was your wife. You knew me for 2 years before we got married. We lived together, shared everything, built a life based on trust, and you threw it all away because 2 people who barely knew me said I was no good." Raphael lowered his head, unable to meet her accusing gaze. "I was confused. You were being cowardly," Letitia cut in. "It was easier to believe I was the problem than to confront your mother. It was easier to blame me than to take responsibility for your own decisions." Each word was a dagger that found its target with surgical precision. Raphael felt his own defenses crumbling before the raw truth Letitia was presenting. "You're right," he admitted finally. "About everything. I was cowardly. I was stupid. I destroyed the most important thing in my life because of insecurities I didn't even know I had. And now what do you want? For me to forgive you and for us to go home as if nothing happened? I don't know what I want. I just know I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I would give anything to undo what I did." Letitia watched him for a long moment, seeing the man she had once loved more than anything, now reduced to a shadow filled with remorse. Part of her, a small but persistent part, wanted to run into his arms, accept his apologies, go back to the life they had built together. But the rational part, the part that had learned to survive alone, knew that some bridges, once burned, could not simply be rebuilt. "Raphael," she said, her voice softer but still firm, "you can't undo what you did. You can't erase the last 8 months. You can't go back in time and choose to trust me instead of throwing me out of the house when I needed you most. I know. Do you know I was pregnant when you threw me out?" The question hit him like lightning. Raphael felt his legs buckle and had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. You knew?" "I found out 3 weeks after leaving home." Letitia's voice was calm, but there was a hardness in it that broke Raphael's heart. 3 weeks trying to understand why my life had fallen apart, and then I discovered I was expecting a child from the man who had rejected me based on lies. Raphael closed his eyes, trying to process the enormity of what he had done. Not only had he destroyed their marriage, but he had abandoned his pregnant wife, leaving her alone to face a pregnancy in a situation of extreme vulnerability. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you lost the right to know." The answer came without hesitation, laden with a pain that had crystallized into determination during months of solitude. "When you accused me of cheating and threw me out of the house, you forfeited the right to be a part of my life, and my child's life. Letitia, please. Please what, Raphael? Please let you be a father after abandoning me. Pregnant. Please forget everything that happened and pretend you didn't destroy our family before it even existed. Raphael felt tears burn his eyes. I didn't know. Didn't know what? That sex can result in pregnancy? That women thrown out of their homes might be carrying the children of those who threw them out? Letitia stood up from the chair with some difficulty, resting her hands on her back. Raphael, your ignorance is no excuse for anything. They stood staring at each other for a tense moment, two strangers who had once been everything to each other, now separated by an abyss of hurt and distrust. What do you want from me? Letitia asked finally. I want to be a part of our child's life. I want to take on my responsibilities. Responsibilities. She repeated the word as if testing its taste. Is that what we are to you now? A responsibility? No, that's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. Letitia walked to the small back window, looking out at the yard where Mr. Anthony cultivated a modest garden. You don't want to come back because you love me. You want to come back because you found out you're going to be a father, and your conscience can't bear to carry that guilt anymore. Raphael began to protest, but stopped when he realized she was right. His motivation for seeking her out had not been purely romantic. It had been a complex mixture of remorse, responsibility, and, yes, love, but a love tainted by guilt. You're right, he admitted, but that doesn't mean my feelings aren't true. I love you, Letitia. I always have. And even if I discovered that in the worst possible way, I want to be this baby's father. Letitia turned to face him, and for the first time since he had arrived, Raphael saw a crack in the armor of anger she had built around herself. Raphael, she said, her voice softer but still firm, it's not about what you want. It's about what's best for this child. And I don't know if a father who abandons his family based on fake photos is what's best for her. Her. It's a girl, Letitia said, unable to completely hide the emotion in her voice. She'll be born in a few weeks. Raphael felt a wave of emotion so intense it almost knocked him down. A daughter. He was going to have a daughter. And he had missed her entire pregnancy, all the doctor's appointments, all the special moments he should have shared with Letitia. What do you want to name her? The question came naturally, as if he still had the right to participate in these decisions. Letitia looked at him with surprise, then with deep sadness. Hope, she said, because that's what kept me alive all these months. Raphael nodded, understanding that the name had nothing to do with him, but with the strength Letitia had found to survive alone. Letitia, he said, taking a careful step towards her, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I don't deserve a second chance. But this girl, she deserves to have a father, and I really want to be the best father I can be for her. And how do I know you won't run away at the first difficulty? How do I know you won't believe more lies about me and decide we're a problem in your life? It was a fair question, and Raphael knew there was no easy answer. How to prove trustworthiness to someone you betrayed in the most painful way possible? You don't know, he said honestly. There's no way to know until I prove it, and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving it, if you let me. Letitia was silent for a long time, one hand resting on her belly, watching the man who had been her husband and who was now almost a stranger. Finally, she sighed deeply. Raphael, I can't go back to you. Not now, maybe never. What you did to me changed who I am, broke something inside me that may not be fixable. Raphael's heart broke, but he nodded, understanding that there were irreversible consequences to his actions. But, Letitia continued, if you truly want to be Hope's father, then we'll have to find a way to make this work, not as a couple, but as two people who have responsibility for this child. I accept any condition you set. First condition, you no longer live in my life. You can visit Hope, you can participate in raising her, but you and I are no longer family. Raphael nodded, though each word was a dagger. Second condition, you don't try to win me back. You don't Try to prove you've changed through romantic gestures or declarations of love. If you want to prove anything, prove it by being a present and reliable father. Understood. Third condition. If one day you decide that having a daughter is too complicated for your life, you tell me before you disappear. Don't do as you did with me. Don't invent excuses. Don't blame me for your limitations. You simply admit you can't and leave. The last condition was laden with all the pain Letitia had carried alone for months, and Raphael understood that she was protecting herself in the only way she knew how. I will never abandon you two, he said, with a conviction that came from the depths of his soul. No matter what happens. We'll see, Letitia replied, without conviction. 2 weeks later, on a rainy October dawn, Letitia felt the first contractions. Mrs. Connie had been staying with her for a few days, worried about the approaching birth, and it was she who called emergency services when she realized there wouldn't be time to get to the hospital by taxi. Letitia was being taken to Mercy Hospital when she remembered the card Raphael had left, with Mr. Anthony, with instructions to call him if anything happened. In an impulsive decision she herself couldn't explain, she asked her mother to call him. Raphael arrived at the hospital drenched by the rain, still in his pajamas, after having driven like a madman through the empty streets of Portland. He found Mrs. Connie in the waiting room, and the woman who had once welcomed him with affection now looked at him with a coldness that chilled his blood. "She asked you to stay," Mrs. Connie said without greeting him. "I don't know why, but she asked." Raphael nodded, understanding that he didn't deserve cordiality from Letitia's family. Hope was born at 6 in the morning, with a strong cry that echoed through the hospital corridor. When the nurse brought the news that it was a healthy baby girl and that both mother and baby were well, Raphael felt tears stream down his face without any embarrassment. "She wants to see you," the nurse said, surprised by the mother's request. Raphael entered the room with trembling steps, finding Letitia exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle of pink blankets. When she looked up at him, there was no anger or hurt, just a deep weariness and the pure happiness of someone who had just given birth. "Do you want to meet your daughter?" she asked, her voice weak but firm. Raphael approached the bed as if treading on sacred ground. When Letitia placed Hope in his arms, he felt as if the entire world had shifted on its axis. The baby was small, perfect, with a serious little frown that made him laugh through his tears. "She's beautiful," he managed to say, his voice choked. "She's just like you," Letitia observed, and there was something close to tenderness in her voice. They stayed there for a few minutes, the three of them together for the first time, like a family that could have been if things had been different. Raphael held his daughter with extreme care, marveling at every detail of her little face, while Letitia watched the two with a complex mixture of emotions. "Raphael," she said, when he returned the baby to her arms, "you can be her father. But we have to do this our way, in our own time. I understand. Don't try to pressure me, don't try to rush things, just be present. Prove you can be reliable." Raphael nodded, understanding that he was getting an opportunity he didn't deserve, but one he wouldn't waste. The months that followed were a delicate dance between two strangers learning to be parents together without being a couple. Raphael appeared every afternoon at Mrs. Connie's house where Letitia had temporarily moved, bringing diapers, formula, and infinite patience to be tested. He changed diapers while Letitia rested, gave bottles during the early hours when she was too exhausted, sang lullabies he had learned online. Slowly, he proved that he was taking fatherhood seriously, not as an obligation, but as a privilege. Letitia observed this transformation cautiously, noticing how Raphael had changed. He didn't try to win her back with grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Instead, he showed love through consistency, through silent presence, through sleepless nights caring for a baby who cried incessantly. Gradually, very gradually, Letitia's anger began to give way to something more complex. It wasn't complete forgiveness, it wasn't total trust, but it was a recognition that Raphael was genuinely trying to be the person she had always believed he could be. The real change came on a January night, when Hope was almost 3, months old, and had spent hours crying with colic. Letitia was at the brink of exhaustion, and Raphael had stayed late trying to calm the baby. When Hope finally fell asleep, they found themselves in the small kitchen, both visibly exhausted. "Coffee?" Raphael offered, noticing Letitia's deep dark circles. "Please." They drank coffee in silence, watching the dawn of another day through the kitchen window. It was Letitia who broke the silence. "Do you know I dream about you every night?" Raphael looked up, surprised by the confession. "I dream about the night you threw me out of the house. I dream that I managed to make you understand that the photos were lies. I dream that you chose to trust me." Raphael felt his chest tighten. "Letitia. And then I wake up and remember that didn't happen. I remember you chose to destroy everything we had." "I know. But lately," she continued, looking directly into his eyes, "I also dream new things. I dream of you taking care of Hope. I dream of you coming home after work. I dream of the possibility that maybe there can still be something between us." Raphael barely dared to breathe, afraid of breaking the fragile moment that was forming. "And that scares me," Letitia admitted, "because I don't know if I could survive you abandoning me again." "That won't happen. You can't guarantee that, Raphael. No one can guarantee the future. I can guarantee that I learned from my mistakes. I can guarantee that now I know the difference between a wife who loves me and people who want to manipulate me. I can guarantee that I will never again choose to trust strangers instead of trusting you." Letitia was silent for a long moment, idly stirring her coffee. I said if we tried again," she said finally, "it would be different. I am different. You are different. We can't pretend nothing happened. I don't want to pretend. I want to build something new, based on what we learned about ourselves this year. And your mother? And Veronica? I cut contact with them completely. My mother is not part of my life, and never will be again. And Veronica, well, she tried to sue me for breach of contract when I cancelled all the projects we were developing." Letitia smiled for the first time in months, a genuine smile that lit up her tired face. "She sued you?" "She tried, but it's hard to sue someone for finding out you were lying." They laughed together, and for a moment the sound echoed through the kitchen like a promise that maybe, just maybe, there was still hope for them. "Raphael," Letitia said, becoming serious again, "if we try again, it has to be slow. Very slow. I can't just go home and pretend we're the same as before." "I understand. And you have to understand that maybe I'll never be able to fully trust again. Maybe there will always be a little scar. I accept that. I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn your trust, even if I never fully succeed." Letitia observed him for a long moment, seeing sincerity in the eyes that had once unjustly accused her, but that now seemed to carry the weight of all the lessons learned in the most painful way possible. "Then maybe," she said, extending her hand across the table, "we can try." Raphael took her hand, as if holding something fragile and precious, because that was exactly what he was doing. 2 years later, they married again, in an even simpler ceremony than the first, in a small garden with only Mrs. Connie, Mr. Anthony, a few close friends, and Hope running between the chairs in her little blue dress. It was not the same naive and confident love as before, but something deeper, more conscious, more true. They had learned that love is not just a feeling, but a daily choice. That trust is built with actions, not with words. That forgiveness does not erase the past, but makes room for a different future. And that sometimes what seems to be the end of everything can just be the beginning of something much better. Hope grew up in a home full of love, but also of honesty about human imperfections. When she asked why Daddy and Mommy didn't have baby pictures of her like other families, they told her the truth in an age-appropriate way, that sometimes people make big mistakes, but true love always finds a way to come home. And so, in a city where the fine rain always falls, where the cold tests the resilience of hearts, 3 people learned that some stories don't end in happily ever after, but in let's try again every day until we get it right. Because that's the kind of ending real people deserve, not perfect but true.